And school leaders and educators are still figuring out what the state's latest guidance on how to reopen buildings means for them. Many worry about how to pay for some of the changes and whether or not all of them will be needed or possible in different parts of the state. Our education reporter, Jeannie Lindsay, attended a webinar with the state schools chief this week. And Jeannie, you've reported that she said a lot of decisions will be left to local health departments. Can you tell us how that's going to work?
Yeah, absolutely. So the state has released this guidance, recommendations for schools to follow, but Superintendent of Public Instruction Jennifer McCormick, Governor Eric Holcomb, and State Health Commissioner Chris Box have all really stressed that it's going to be a community decision. School boards, superintendents need to work with their local health authorities because ultimately those local health authorities have a pretty big say on whether schools will be allowed to operate, whether or not they're doing enough to protect the health and safety of students and staff.
So what are some of the guidelines the state is offering up?
So some of them talk about masks. They recommend that staff and students wear masks. They've recommended that staff and students are screened for COVID symptoms. They've also recommended training for teachers to recognize some of those symptoms. They also recommend maintaining social distancing, so rearranging classrooms, preventing students from congregating in big lunchrooms to eat, things like that. They've also made recommendations about how to approach things like special education and extracurriculars. So it's pretty wide-reaching and covers a lot of bases. But again, they're really hoping folks use that as a reference point to maybe start forming their local plans based on what works best.
You know, I've read a lot from parents who, on one hand, a lot of them really want to see their kids physically go back to school in August, but they're also really worried about safety. So is there going to be any room in the guidelines for parents to make decisions about what kind of instruction their child receives in the fall?
Yeah, absolutely. Part of the recommendations encourages schools to really look at their remote learning plans and to shape those to make them a little bit more sustainable over long periods of times in case we see a second wave of the outbreak. But they are really leaving it up to locals to decide how they want to work with their parents, because you're right, parents are worried either for the health and safety of their child or the school experience or how they're learning. So there's definitely a lot of room for schools to have some of that flexibility, and Indiana has always been really proud of its education philosophies to give that power to parents, and we are seeing that definitely play out here with some of the consequences for absences even being recommended to be waived.
Okay, we just have under 30 seconds, so one last thing. When do you expect that we'll start to hear what local districts are doing? Because August will be here before you know it.
Yeah, some schools even start at the end of July. So they have about 6 weeks, some of them, to digest all of this. So again, though, it's a really local decision. So it really depends when schools decide they want to bring kids back and how and when they want to communicate with parents.
All right, Jeannie, thank you very much.
Yeah.